What's up, Raider Nation? What's up, YouTube? Millennial Raider here today. Today we're going to be talking about Mark Davis. So let's get into it. Before we move forward, what I'm just stating is things that happened, things that I felt at that time. Overall, I don't think Mark Davis is a bad guy. I don't think he's the worst owner in the NFL. I think he's one of the few NFL ownerships that is a fan of the team. That's pretty cool. As a fan of Oakland sports, we got Joe Lacob, who is going to spend all the money. He had to move to San Francisco to make that money. I get it. We have John Fisher, who's the devil. And then we have Mark Davis. And so John Fisher is, I believe, one of the richest owners in MLB, but won't spend a dime on his team. Mark Davis, he's willing to spend, obviously. When it comes to ownership in the NFL, the Raiders are one of the few teams where Mark's main income is the Raiders, right? We got Stan Kroenke, who has all his business ventures. The Rams are like a trophy on his shelf, right? Robert Kraft, who owns Crafts, and Patriots were just, a kind of a trophy on his shelf. The Raiders are Mark Davis and Al Davis. That's the business. Moving to Vegas, moving somewhere where they can generate revenue and generate ticket sales, I get it. If you want to spend money, you got to make money. And then as time kind of transpired, we've learned that the Raiders try to stay in Oakland. John Fisher blocked it, got the A's to commit to the A's, and now look what's happening, right? Mark Davis did everything he could to bring a Super Bowl to Oakland before he left. John Fisher is destroying the relationship between Oakland and the A's. Things like that is making me appreciate Mark Davis even more, all right? So Mark Davis originally developed the retail side for the Raiders. Helped develop, I guess, the Raider image. That's where Mark was, beginning his career or his start in the organization. He also hung out in the equipment room where he invented like the little hand warmers that the wide receivers use, which I think is pretty cool because, my dad owned a team. I'm not inventing nothing. Good for him. He invented that in 1986, but we'll go back to 1980 when he also was helping negotiate players' contracts, which is weird because he was negotiating on the representation side of the players and not the team that his dad owned. And so he represented players like Cliff Branch. He got Cliff Branch an annuity. I don't know how to really pronounce it, but basically Cliff Branch was getting a check for the rest of his life. And Mark Davis negotiated that in 1980, and Cliff Branch died in 2019, so almost 40 years. I mean, that's not a bad negotiation right there, Mark. But because of his relationship and being too close to players, Al would eventually kick him out of the house. Mark, you need to be in the business for the Raiders, not the players. And that's pretty much what Mark's professional career was with the Raiders before he eventually took over in 2011. But before we get into Mark when he officially took over, I do want to mention in 2010 when the Raiders had their first non-losing season in 7 years, Al Davis ended up firing Tom Cable at the end of the season. People were upset. I understand why Al Davis did it. For those of you who don't know, Fred Biletnikoff, who's a Super Bowl MVP for the Raiders, his daughter unfortunately didn't make it in a domestic violence dispute. And so since then, Al Davis has just taken a zero-tolerance stand on having anybody in the organization who's associated with domestic violence. And so Tom Cable lied to Al Davis about a domestic violence incident, and Al Davis had no choice but, stand on business. You'll see why I mentioned that later on. In October 2011, Al Davis passes. Mark officially takes over the team. Raiders went 8-8, and Mark fired Hugh Jackson, which again wasn't a popular decision. After years of 5-4 or 5-12, 4-13, 2-14, going 8-8 was a breath of fresh air for all of us. Hugh Jackson, I don't think understood the dynamic of power after Al Davis passed. I don't think anybody really understood because Al, officially, or not officially, unofficially was the head coach, the GM, and the owner. And so I think there was just a lot of just overstepping toes there. I can immediately see the difference with Mark Davis taking over. One was being more accessible to training camp. As a kid, I've always wanted to go to training camp, but you can go to training camp in two ways. Booster club and being like a sweet ticket owner, and I wasn't any of those. So I never really got to go to the training camps. But that year I did because Mark Davis allowed fans to do it. Mark Davis also did like a rally for the Raiders. Al never did that from my understanding. When I was a kid, the Raiders changed the font on their website, I would know because I was on that website back and forth, every page to the bottom, top to bottom, everything. And so I never read about FanFest. I knew they used to do like these sideline passes where you pay like $10 a month. And I was like, oh, let's get it. But then I also read that you needed an actual game ticket to use it. So, like, I remember Al Davis doing stuff like that. But I don't remember a fan fest. The fan fest was really cool. It was like a rally. The players were on stage. I got a player-worn jersey. I got a Tommy Kelly one and a Tyvon Branch one. They were signing autographs. And then season ticket holders got to do a tour in the locker room, which was fun. And then when you leave the locker room, Jim Otto's sitting in like the media room waiting to sign autographs, and it's like Disneyland. That was pretty cool. Mark gave me an experience that I've never had before, and I obviously haven't forgotten. Decorating the Coliseum, Al wasn't a fan of decorating it. You can tell that the A's played there. Mark was a fan of decorating it. The little borders for after the first row in the Coliseum had the Raiders logo. Mount Davis had the Raiders logo on it, and so you can see that Mark had a branding idea, creating a Raider image. And we'll just kind of fast forward, right? Reggie McKenzie drafts one of the best Raider drafts that I can remember. Derek Carr, Khalil Mack, Gabe Jackson, TJ Carey was serviceable as well. And so Mark ends up firing Dennis Allen in the middle of the 2014 season. I know Carr wanted a little bit longer time with Dennis Allen, but I think Mark was kind of showing like, hey, I got your guys' back. Like, you guys are good. It's the coaching that is kind of letting you down right now. And so that message, I understood. In the offseason of 2015 is when things kind of took a turn. I couldn't understand it. I wasn't feeling it. Free agent Greg Hardy, who had domestic violence issues, was looking for a job. I read an article that the Raiders were interested. The next day, Mark Davis debunked that. At that time, I believed him. Now, I don't. I think he was trying to push limits, and as soon as it got out, he just kind of backed away from it. Also, in the 2015 offseason, Mark Davis interviewed Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan is a known enemy of Al Davis and the Raiders. I don't understand the interview. Mike Shanahan hadn't been in the league for a couple years at that point, had a reputation for ruining RG3's career, and had a reputation for not, being an enemy of the Raiders. So I don't understand why he interviewed it till this day. He doubled down on it and blamed quotes from his father or something like that, which your dad didn't like the guy, bro. Like, your dad would be pissed right now that you're interviewing Mike Shanahan. That didn't sit right with me. I wasn't feeling it. We hired Jack Del Rio anyways. We didn't even hire Mike Shanahan. We're just interviewing him just to interview him, I guess. I don't know. We hired Jack Del Rio as a defensive coordinator. We had some good years, right? We had year-over-year improvement. We were 3-14 or 3-13 the year before. And then we won like 6 or 7 games the next year, and then 2016 happened where we had that 12-4 season, and then 2017 where we kind of regressed again. We fired Bill Musgrave. I still don't understand that. And then 2018 happened. Mark would fire Jack Del Rio and sign John Gruden, who hadn't been in the league for 10 years. His last 5 years in the league, didn't make the playoffs or have a winning record. Signed him for 10 years, $100 million. I don't know what John Gruden and Al Davis's relationship was at the end. I do know I don't remember seeing John Gruden at the stadium much other than Monday night games where he was calling the games. I don't remember that. I know that Al Davis traded John Gruden in spite of whatever argument they had. I never knew really what happened between John Gruden and Al. I wasn't upset that Mark hired him for that reason. I was upset because Mark hired him with that kind of money, that kind of commitment. And I was a fan of Reggie McKenzie, which means that, Reggie McKenzie is going to be gone. That is another example for me of how that hiring is where Mark Davis is stuck in that playoff game versus the Patriots. He's hiring John Gruden off of, his skill back then in that game. In 2018 as well, the Raiders would hire Tom Cable. Tom Cable, who was fired from the Raiders because he lied to Al Davis about domestic violence dispute. That rubbed me the wrong way as well. We may not be winners, but at least, we can believe in something. And so that was kind of a sour taste in my mouth. And then the Raiders broke my heart by firing Greg Papa. Greg Papa, if you don't know, is a longtime Raiders announcer. I mentioned before that I couldn't watch games on TV when they were at home because they were blacked out. I had to listen to it on the radio. Greg Papa was on the radio. Greg Papa had a lot of great calls. He helped mold me into the fan I am now, right? Because if he's not illustrating the games that he is, I'm not caring. I was, really annoyed when they fired Greg Papa, and Greg Papa did an interview on why they fired him.
We met the day after the 4th of July, and the 4th of July is Al Davis's birthday, and we shared a few glasses of wine, and then he got to the crux of it is, which we're not going to bring you back. The genesis of my falling out of favor with this organization came in January 2015. Mark Davis and the Raider hierarchy chose to interview Mike Shanahan to be the head coach of the Raiders. Well, I am extremely close and have been for my whole time with the Raiders with the patriarch of the Raiders, Al Davis. And there are three men that he loathed more than any: Pete Rozelle, Marcus Allen, and Mike Shanahan. And I'm not sure what order I'd put him in. Probably Pete Rozelle would be number one. The other two could tie for second. I knew the interview occurred about a week and a half before, but 15 minutes one day before my radio show, it became public. I was compelled to talk about it. There were a couple of former players that were on that day that kind of cornered me in, and I gave a speech, and I firmly believe it, that Mike Shanahan cannot coach the Oakland Raiders. I threatened to quit. So anyway, Mark Bedane, sought me out and said, you got to make this better with the owner. He's not happy. We had dinner one night, me and Mark Bedane. So I called the owner the next day, and I don't know what he wanted me to do. If he wanted me to apologize, I wasn't sorry. I was sorry the way he took it. I was sorry the way he interpreted it, but I was not sorry defending his father.
Not only was he the Raiders announcer, he was one of Al's best friends. And I just didn't understand what was going on at that time. This was the time where I was feeling really disconnected with the team. I didn't get it. Not much since then, right? John Gruden's struggling to get his wins. We moved to Vegas. The Raiders do this whole, Al Davis at Allegiant Stadium special. And to me, that special just rubbed the wrong way. I'm just yapping here. One, CGI Al Davis. That was not cool. Two, it just felt like an Allegiant Stadium commercial, which don't tell me you're going to give me a documentary or a special about Al Davis, and it's literally just a commercial for Allegiant Stadium. Then we go to 2022, where the Raiders are coming off that playoff season, and Mark hires Josh McDaniels, who is from the coaching tree of Bill Belichick, who is the coach that was on the other sideline of that Patriots-Raiders playoff game. This is just more evidence to me that, Mark can't get out of that game. People were telling him not to hire that guy. Players were telling him not to hire that guy, and he just didn't listen and hired him. That went how it went. We got 1 million Patriot players. We practiced against the Patriots in training camp. We hired someone from the Patriots to be our GM. We were Patriot West, and I couldn't stand it. I think Al would be rolling over in his grave, right? This is an organization that in 2009 was pulling teeth to get Richard Seymour from, right? We couldn't do business with them. He's just inviting everybody to our building. It's just funny to me. Another instance of him still being in that game is when I took a tour of the Raiders Stadium. He has the Snow Bowl picture hanging up in the suites. And it's bro, we lost that game. What are you doing? I think he was stuck in that game. It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch this unfold. It's hard to see my team go through this. He also was selling the Raiders short by giving Tom Brady a great deal on partnership with the Raiders. We got a couple goats that maybe would like to do that, and maybe, that would be better. Recently, it feels like a change with Mark Davis. Everything I laid out, it just feels like a learning experience from someone who was genetically qualified to be an NFL owner. He ended up firing Josh McDaniels. The Raiders are really rallying around Antonio Pierce. He hired Antonio Pierce as a full-time coach this time. Mark Davis thinks as a fan, which is rough, but it could be worse, right? We can have someone who doesn't care about the team like the Redskins. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Road to Warren Sapp.